Hey everybody, this is Lauren Stein over here at Activate. I am the implementation manager, and today we're going to cover some question and answers that were sent in prior to this webinar, as well as the questions that you enter in during the webinar. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. The first topic we're going to discuss today is something that we keep running into in support, and that is the question on whether it's okay to connect or sync Activate to a new QuickBooks file after you have already synchronized with a different QuickBooks file. So the question was, can I sync with a different QuickBooks file than my original? And also, what happens if I force this new sync? So this question actually, believe it or not, comes in a lot, whether it's before or after actually doing this new synchronization. And the answer to this question is a gigantic no, don't do it, please. It can wreak havoc pretty much. We put things into the program to block our customers from doing so, but there are still a couple of ways that you can force this issue to happen. I'm not going to cover what those ways are because it's not something that you should be doing anyway. So what happens when you sync with a different QuickBooks file from the original is it actually breaks the data links between the two files. So the first sync that you run with that new QuickBooks file on your existing Activate file has a potential to break things like sales tax, customers, invoices, payments, vendor bills, etc. Pretty much anything that was created in Activate and synchronized to the old file also has a potential to be removed altogether or seen as a duplicate record. And this can cause a lot of headache for anybody who does this. And if you contact the support team after synchronizing with a different QuickBooks file than what you're actually connected to originally, their first response is going to be, do you have a backup of both programs? If you do, restore the backup and, don't do that again, pretty much. If there isn't a backup, you will actually begin a long project on attempting to either recreate these transactions in the new file or starting from that point forward, just knowing that there's missing data and making general journals to make sure that the value of your chart of accounts is correct. Don't do this. It really can cause a lot of problems, and we do have customers that have contacted us after the fact and don't have a backup of either program, and it's just an insane project to try to get around the issues that are caused by breaking these links. Because, sales tax, the tax codes, they have this unique identifier in the database. And so if you sync with a different file, it adds 2 more tax codes with different GUIDs, and all your other invoices and stuff are going to use the old ones. And that's just a small example of some of the stuff that can break if you decide to do this. So if you're starting a new QuickBooks file, which we do have customers that do that, and it is okay to do so, you'll need to also start a new Activate file. We do have a couple of options on what goes on during this starting fresh phase, if you want to call it that. You can either start fresh completely and import stuff directly into your QuickBooks file to be brought over during Create Company, or you can work with a rep on our team to insert records from the old Activate database into the new Activate database. Now, yes, we can transfer over some from the old Activate file into the new file, but it is limited to things like lists. So that's going to include everything in Configuration Manager. That's users, carriers, carrier services, business activity setup, everything in configuration. We can also copy over the customer list, or you could bring in the customer list into QuickBooks and let that information synchronize over into the new Activate file during the Create Company process. And then we can also bring over products from the old file into the new. And we can limit that. So if you wanted to take that opportunity to maybe clean up your Activate data a little bit, you could do things like marking customers or products as inactive, and we can either run queries on the database to create exports in order to import that information into the new file, or we can copy it directly from one database to another and then update the necessary fields within the database that links it to that old file. Keep in mind that if you do need to do this, that the transactional history will stay in the old Activate file for your reference, and any new transactions will be posted in the new file. If you have open sales orders during this migration, they can be exported into a CSV file to be recreated via the import into the new file. Now again, that's just going to be open sales orders. It's not going to be completed orders. So if you are needing to start a new QuickBooks file, let's say maybe your company was bought out or it's merging with another company and you have to create a new tax ID, therefore a new QuickBooks file, then that's when you would contact the Activate sales rep that you worked with whenever you purchased the software and talk to them about options and see what needs to be done, and then also get it assigned to a rep so we can get that project started. So again, just wanted to give you a huge warning, and this goes for any accounting software you're using, Intact, QuickBooks, Sima, all of those. It's all the same. You would need to create a new Activate company for your new accounting software company. So since I'm not going to show you how to force that new sync, because honestly it's not good information for y'all to have, let's go ahead and move on, and then we'll jump into Activate as we go through the next couple of slides. So let's talk about Configuration Manager, and we'll start at requested dates. I had a few questions come in based on purchase order default date. So let's talk about some of the configuration options that we have. For both purchasing and sales, there is a days to ship option in configuration management. The sales order side sets the default requested ship date to however many days as specified. The purchase order settings set the requested date based on a similar setting, but the requested date is actually listed in the same place as your order date on a sales order. So let's take a look at Activate. And we will go into Configuration Manager. So let's File, Configuration Management. I'll move this over a little bit. And we'll start at Sales Orders, Order Options. So this days to ship right here is set to 7. So this means it normally takes you about 7 days to ship an item to your customer, let's say whether that's based on the however many days it takes from the order date, or you can also go as far as setting some of these settings for picking. So however many days before the requested ship date to start picking. So I've got customers that use, they set it at the default because maybe they don't really look at requested ship date, or they use 0 if they want the requested ship date to start at the day that you entered the order. But by default, a new company is going to be set to 7. Now, again, if you're using the print pick ticket utility and Activate, the picking section that I was talking about just a second ago is important for you to understand. So you can set the number of days to print a pick ticket before the don't ship before date on a sales order, as well as a number of days before the actual requested ship date. So let's say it takes you about 2 days to get an order out the door from the time you print a pick ticket to the time it is placed on a truck. So that means you'd enter 2 in whichever field makes sense, because not everybody uses the don't ship before or after dates, but a lot of our customers do use requested ship date. So a lot of times we'll see this to be more common, to say maybe it takes us 2 days to get an order out the door once we've printed the pick ticket. That's what this means. And that requested ship date is going to be the date that drives whenever you use that print pick ticket utility on what pick tickets are going to print. Okay, and then alternatively, we do have a similar option in the purchasing section of Configuration Manager. So that's purchasing options. And it's the same caption, the days to ship. So this means that when you create a purchase order, the requested date of that purchase order is going to default to 7 days ahead of today. And keep in mind that this requested date on the purchase order is actually in the same spot as the order date on the sales order. And the PO form itself actually prints the requested date if the issued date is blank, but once you issue the purchase order, the PO will show the issued date of the purchase order. Because having an issued PO in Activate is key for receiving and invoicing. While we're here on the screen, we can take a look at the other available statuses for purchase orders. So right here we've got the order status set to entered, but a lot of our customers set it to issued by default. The only thing is that if you have any kind of approval process that you want to go through on POs, you probably shouldn't start at issued, because issued means that this PO is approved, you're going to send it to the vendor, and you're waiting on the vendor to ship these products to your warehouse. So if you start out with a default status of issued, you actually don't have the option to choose entered, request for quote, or pending approval. But it also goes the same. So if you start out as request for quote, you're not going to have entered. If you start out as pending approval, you're not going to have request for quote or entered. So set this default purchase order status to whatever the beginning step to your process is going to be. So that way you have the full functionality based on your needs. We're going to go ahead and set it to pending approval just so you can see that later on. And then the next section that we're going to cover in configuration that came up was about reports. So a customer asked how to make a report available on the dashboard. So this is actually going to be based on the report document type specified in the report catalog. And then we're going to jump into Activate here in a second, and we'll also take a look at, while we're there, adding selection prompts, because that is also a very common question that we get in support. So let's go back into Activate. And we'll go to Reports, Report Catalog. And so before we do this, I want you to keep in mind that the dashboard itself is only going to show one page of any report. And so that's why by default, the reports that we have available on the dashboard are summary reports that have like a chart or a graph in them. It's just going to be summary information. It's not going to be, a 5-page report that you can scroll through each page. And so if it is a larger report, the setup on the dashboard itself should include filters to limit the data that you're actually showing. So that way it's okay that it's only showing you one page because you're filtering on a very specific set of data. So to make a report available on the dashboard, again, we're in Report Catalog, and we're going to make the Open Orders report available by changing the document type to Dashboard Panel. So the Open Orders report is found in the Order Processing section, Orders, and then Open Orders. So what we do is we hit Edit, and we change this document type to Dashboard Panel. And this gives us the ability to add this report to our dashboard. Now, while we're here, another thing that we also get asked about, again, is the selection prompts. So let's go ahead and add a selection prompt to one of the inventory reports. And we're going to do that to the stock on hand, because some of our customers want to see the stock on hand report only for items that are either above or below 0, because we do have some customers that invoice into the negative. Let's say they create orders and they want to print the pick tickets for stuff that they haven't received yet, but they receive stuff overnight before they put everything on the trucks. And sometimes that can get you into negative on hand. So they'll use this report to figure out what they're behind on, what needs to be received, and so forth. So to add that functionality, you'll expand the warehouse section of the inventory report, select stock on hand, and then we'll go to the selection prompt fields over here. And so what you do in edit mode is you add the prompt for quantity on hand. So I'm giving the prompt a name right now. You can let it default based on the field you select, but it's not going to put any spaces in it. It's going to put it in exactly how it is on the field in the database. And then in the field, this is the field that you're actually going to filter on in the report. So once you click in the field, you can open up a browse. And these are all the available views in this report. And the quantity on hand is actually located in the product warehouse summary. And if you scroll down, we have quantity on hand. And you'll select that field, and it'll default to single. So that means that you'll be able to enter in a number to filter on. And so we'll go ahead and save. And after closing configuration management, my user, we'll go ahead and look in the user information, sys, actually has the open dashboard automatically checked. So it's going to open automatically. If you have some other modules like business activity scheduling or business activity and you want to use the review, or even if you want to open alerts or order manager automatically, you can actually check those options here as well. So let's close configuration manager and my dashboard will come up. And this will be a good opportunity to go ahead and add that open orders report to the dashboard. So to do that, you will do edit, and then some more options will show up across the top, and we'll do add report. Now this report menu is only going to show you reports that have that dashboard panel document type specified. So it was in orders, and open orders is now available. And like I was talking about earlier, a lot of these are summary reports that are here by default, and that's because it only shows one page. So let's go ahead and select this report, and that'll pull up these selection prompts. And we'll say we want to do orders today because, again, this is a dashboard report and we want it to be pretty much just one page. If it goes over one page, it's fine, but this is just a snapshot. We're not going to filter on any customer or product ID, but let's say if you have high volume orders and maybe order date to date isn't enough of a filter, or maybe you're doing EDI or something and you want to see a specific trading partner show up in this report on your dashboard, then you could filter further down and say, I want it to be only this customer, and you could even go as far as filtering on a specific product ID as well. But we're going to set it to today, hit done, and that's going to automatically put it up at the top. But what you can do is you can grab the title of this report and start dragging it, and once you do, you see these options on where you can drop it in here. And so we're going to drop it to make it another tabbed report. And again, this report, we don't have any open orders today just yet, but we will after we're done with the demonstration. And then you can also right click on the title of it and rename so it can be more verbose on what this actually is filtered on. So we can say today's open orders. And so that way at the bottom, it now says today's open orders, and we hit save. And you have all of these dashboard reports available to you with tabs so you can toggle between each one. And then also you can set the auto refresh rate. So I would set this to maybe like 5 or 15 minutes, but again, you can also click refresh to refresh it manually as you're looking at the dashboard. Okay, so let's also take a look at the report that we added the filter to. So inventory management, warehouse, stock on hand, select, and now we have a quantity on hand filter that we didn't have. So let's say you want to look for things that are less than 0. So quantity on hand is less than 0. So this is not going to include 0. It's going to be everything that is below 0. If you wanted to include 0, it'd be less than or equal to. We'll hit preview, and we do have one work table that has a -3 quantity on hand. So this will give us kind of a jump start on, how did this become negative? What do we need to do to resolve this? Because obviously if we shipped it to our customer, we did have it in stock. And then that can go on the other opposite side of that as well, greater than 0. So this shows everything that's not 0, but it's over 0, and it's, 5 pages of products here. And these new filters will be available for all users. The dashboard is per user. So the dashboard is, you could set up, multiple reports and it'll be different depending on which user logs in. Okay, and then before we get into the next section, we're also going to be covering the import of promotional pricing or quantity breaks, which does require the setup of price codes. So let's take a look at creating a price code so that way we can get this information imported, because price codes are required for that import. But actually, before we get into Activate, let's go ahead and talk about promotional pricing and tiers real quick. So some of our customers need to set up promotional pricing based on quantity, dates, or a mix of both. So this information can be imported into Activate via Excel. And the minimal requirement for a generic pricing import includes product ID, price code, and price. But for promotional prices, we'll also be including effective, expiration date, and then also a separate import for low and high quantity price tiers. On top of the product ID, price code, price, effective, expiration, low, and high quantity, we're also going to be mapping price type, which tells Activate what kind of price that is, whether it's a straight price, so we're going to charge $5 flat, nothing else, or if maybe it's a % off list, so maybe this customer group gets 5% off list or 10% off list, or if it's a % over or an amount over your cost. So the price type tells Activate what that means, what that price means. So let's go ahead and get into Activate again, and we'll take a look at creating a price code first. So that again is in Configuration Manager. Sales orders, price code. And right now we've got a dealer, distributor, special, trade, and high volume. In edit mode, you'll see an asterisk line appear. You can create your own price codes. The code itself has a limit of 3 characters and the description has a limit of 50. So obviously you can be very descriptive in the description of the price code. I've got some customers that use this price code scheme, and I've got other customers that set up price codes based on maybe what customer it is. Let's say they sell to Home Depot versus CVS, and Home Depot gets different prices than CVS prices. So they'll set up a Home Depot price code, and they actually have a customer record per site, per Home Depot site, and they assign that price code to each of those sites. So it defaults to the prices assigned to that code. Okay, so we're not going to add any price codes here. We're just going to use the existing ones, but I wanted you to see where that was in Configuration Manager. So look, before we import a new set of prices, let's take a look at product E10, because that's the one we're going to be working on today for this import. So on E10, on the Prices tab, right now we have a list price for $15 a box, and then we have an R price code for $14 a box, and a high volume price code for $12 a box. So to import new prices, actually let's pull up that spreadsheet. Okay, so this is the import that we've set up. You would, for each new price record, you would repeat the product ID down the column. You would specify the unit of measure that this price includes, and then also the specific price or percent. In this case, these lines are percents because the L percent is a mark down off of list, or the specific price because this is a P price type. The price code that it relates to, if it has a beginning and ending date, and then also the low and high quantities. So starting at a low quantity of 5 and then going to 9 for this first tier means that anybody that is ordering 1 to 4 for this D price code is actually going to get list because there's no 1 to 4 price. And then once they start ordering 5 or more, they'll get into these tiered prices. So to import, we have to close the spreadsheet. And let's go to File, Import Data. And then if you're importing anything other than list price, you're going to be using the product price import. Just for ease of use, I've already created a template for this import. So I'm going to click Edit Mapping. But when you're creating a new template, you actually click Create Mapping, and you'll specify the spreadsheet, the specific tab if you have multiple, and then give it a name and a description. If you are using an existing spreadsheet that you've already got a template for and you've already updated the spreadsheet and you don't need to verify anything, you go straight to Begin Import. But I'm going to click Edit Mapping just so you can see how this all looks. So we've got the price import spreadsheet, the worksheet for price import, the ID, the name, and then across the top, here we'll switch to columns so you can see what's mapped here. Across the top of the preview are the headers for the actual spreadsheet, and the second row is the field that it's mapped to. So you can see product ID is mapped to product ID, unit of measure is mapped to price unit. This is to show you that the header of the column doesn't actually matter as long as you understand what that relates to in Activate. The price, price code, price type, and then also beginning end is mapped to effective and expiration date, and then we have low and high quantities. And again, before we do this import, I want to show you the R price code because this is actually going to change since we're adding a promotional price. Doesn't have any effective or expiration dates, and it's $14. Okay, so we'll go ahead and begin import. This is the validation step. If nothing fails, it's going to show you all of the rows. You see 5 rows passed, 0 failed, 5 rows total. If it does fail, it'll give you the reason for failure, and you can also modify the data directly on this screen based on why it's failing. Hit next, finish, run a backup. It's always good to run a backup, and import complete. So 5 product prices are updated. We'll close this import, refresh this page. Now our price has added an expiration date of 6/30, so that way Activate, there's no confusion on which price to use. Beginning 7/1, the R price will get this $13.50 price, and then after 7/31, beginning 8/1, it'll revert back to the $14 price. So that ends the promotion. And so anytime after 8/1, they'll get the regular price, and anytime in the month of July, they'll get this $13.50 price. And that is only for customers that have the R price code listed on their customer window. So to show you how this all works, let's create a couple of new sales orders. I'm going to keep this window open over here so we can have them both open at the same time. And we're going to click New. And the customer name is Abercrombie. They have the price code R assigned to them. And just to show you where that's assigned, we'll do View Customer. It's on the Prices tab, and the default price code is R. They do have some customer-specific pricing here, but if you have questions about that, we might be able to cover that after this demonstration. But for right now, we're going to focus on what we imported. And yes, you can import customer-specific prices. You just need to include the customer name in that import to assign it to that customer record. All right, so let's add product E10. And as you can see, it defaults to the price code of $14 because it is $6.28. So you have a couple of options here. Let's say it's $6.28, your customer is aware of the 7/1 price, and it's so close that you want to go ahead and give them that future price. You can actually click in the price code field right here, and you'll see this little browse button pops up. And you can see the existing prices, as well as checking this box down here to include expired and future prices. So that will also give you the discounted price and then, the other effective 8/1 price. So you could double click on this to give them the future price. You could also use one of the other dealer prices and give them a different deal. So let's do price code D at $12.75 a box. Now let's say we open this order at a later date and we want to go ahead and change it to 6. And let's say maybe we don't do a quoting process. The customer just orders a specific product for a specific quantity and you don't really talk about pricing for some reason. Or if you want to just change the date and then see what the prices would be. So you could say reset prices, and this is going to reset the prices back to the price code that's related to the customer, and it's going to fit within the dates of those future prices. So now you see the price is $13.50. When the order date was today, which we can set that back to today, and reset prices, it goes back to 14. So that's how those effective and expiration dates work. And you can also go so far as adding, 8/1 or 8/2 to see what that price would be. And again, using that price code toggle right here. So let's go ahead and save this. And then we're going to create a new order for ABC who uses the price code D. And so for E10, if they order 1 box, they're getting 15. And that's the list price. If we override this to be, let's say, 6 boxes, it changes that price to be $14.25. Now let's go to 13. Now it's $13.50. And then let's go to 20 because we set a low quantity for the 15, but we didn't set a high quantity. So that's going to give it the biggest discount for price code D. And then as always, you can select the existing price codes in this window as well. But we're going to go ahead and let it default to the 20 box price and save. And now before we move on to the next subject, we can go ahead and refresh this dashboard and see the 2 open orders that we just created. And again, just keep in mind that this is a snapshot. You can make it bigger. You can, in edit mode, you can drag this line over to see more information. Let's say like this side of report shows a lot more detail. So we want to make this section wider. You can do that in edit mode as well. But now you see those 2 orders. We'll close the dashboard. Okay, so another topic that we have come across is we've got some customers utilizing an in-transit or on-the-water warehouse, and so that means that they're creating inventory transfer sessions on a very regular basis to move the items from in-transit, where they're receiving it into the physical stock, because they're responsible for the value of the inventory at the time it leaves the port. Let's say they're importing from China or India or something. So they would want to receive the products into in-transit, and then once it actually hits their physical inventory, that's when they would transfer it into physical stock. So to make this process a little bit easier, users can actually send the PO detail information to Excel to be imported and posted as a transfer from one warehouse to another, instead of manually creating a transfer session, selecting the to and from warehouse, and then manually adding each product. So you can actually set up multiple templates as well and set defaults, so the users just need to select the proper template to transfer from warehouse A to warehouse B without modifying the mapping in any way. Or you can let them, maybe, let's say if you don't want to override the file each time, you want to save these Excel files, you can just give it a new name, edit the template, and switch out the spreadsheet for the new spreadsheet. Now also, we do have some posting options for transaction imports. You have the option to either post automatically at the end of the import or create the session to review before posting. So that comes into play for receipts, transfers, and balance adjustments. You can either post them directly into inventory, or you can create a session to review before posting. That is up to your discretion on what you want to do, and if you know how much you're wanting to rely on what your users have access to. So let's go ahead and get back into Activate and talk about this specific process. So let's open the purchase order window. I created purchase order 1272 before this, and I also just take note that the warehouse is in transit, and I've already received the items into the in transit warehouse because I figured that y'all probably don't need help receiving, but we just want to cover this specific section that I'm talking about. So you see ordered 10, received 10, and it's the same quantity for each one, but we do have customers that maybe they order a big container or they order multiple POs from the same vendor, and those POs are kind of in a mixed container, so they'll receive maybe 5 of each instead of the full ordered quantity, or whatever other circumstance works for you. So what you do is, if you right click on the detail grid, a menu appears to send to Excel or restore settings. Now the restore settings, what that does is, let's say the user moved some of the fields around on the PO window on the grid, or they accidentally made a column wider or too skinny or something. Restore settings sets it back to look like this. So let's say we have ordered quantity ordered like that, and that was done on accident. You do restore settings and it resets it back to the default. Okay, so send to Excel. And what this does is it creates an Excel spreadsheet based on the items that are listed in that grid. So we have line number, line type, product ID, vendor product ID, the received quantity, the unit of measure, the line amount, whether it's complete or not, which we don't really need that information, description, outstanding quantity, invoice quantity, and then instructions and GL expense account. But right now, we're just going to focus on the product ID and the received quantity because we're going to be creating a transfer. So let's save this spreadsheet, and I'm going to put it on the desktop, and I'm actually going to override this IT to F warehouse because this is going to, let's say I don't want to save these individual spreadsheets, so I just override the file each time. If you don't want to override it, just give it a unique name and then save it. Save. Yes, I want to replace it. And then I'm going to close this spreadsheet. And the imports are all in the same location, import data, except for import sales orders, but that's a whole nother bear. So get import data and transfers. Now again, I've already created a mapping, and it's the same for every other map. If you need to create a new, do create new. If you override the spreadsheet every time, you can go ahead and begin import, but we're going to do edit mapping so you can see these options as well. So the reason I named the template the way that I did is to show you it's possible to create unique templates depending on number of warehouses, because a lot of the times when we have a customer using an in-transit warehouse, they also have multiple physical warehouses. So a lot of times they'll have maybe like a warehouse up in Maine and then a warehouse in Florida, depending on what port you're using, or maybe South Carolina or something. You can create a unique template for each one, or you can just have a generic template, and on the columns, each time they run the import, they would need to update the default values for the warehouse from the from and to. But what happens is if you have multiple physical warehouses, you might not want to depend on the users to remember to do this, to reset the default values, because this is, especially if you're having it post automatically, you might want to create a template for each physical warehouse or each unique combination of the to and from warehouse. And they would just select the specific one that they're using and then run the import. And then also the detail, I'm just using product ID and quantity. But if you have bin locations, there's also a from and to location that you can enter. You can enter those again as defaults, or you could add them to the spreadsheet before you run this import as another column. So on the options tab, this is where that post transactions comes into play. Right now it's set to no. So what this means is after I run this import, there's going to be an inventory transfer session for me to review before posting. If I set this to yes and run the import, it's going to post this transfer into inventory without letting me review the session. So again, this depends on your discretion on which option you want to choose. I'm going to leave this at no for now, just so we can come back and do this again and set to yes so you can see the difference. So we'll hit begin import. Everything passed. Next, finish. I'm not going to run a backup right now, but I do recommend, in a live environment to run backups before you run imports, especially if you have post-transaction set to yes. Okay, import complete. One transaction, one session with 3 detail lines. So we'll hit close. And now we have inventory transfers. Now we have session 88 in the dropdown for us to review before we post. And the to location is the primary location for the warehouse for each of these items. There is no from location because it was, in transit. We don't really know what the location is for in transit for the bin location. So we leave that as blank. Okay, and we'll open up this product as well so you can see that we have this in transit warehouse that's received, but there's no transfer posted, just to show you that nothing's posted. So let's close this inventory transfer session, and we're going to do the import data, and we're going to change this map to post automatically. Begin import. Yes, I want to save that mapping. From now on, I want it to post automatically. Next, finish. Okay, so now same number of records created, but it's actually been posted into inventory. So now after we refresh it and we toggle back to the in-transit warehouse, now we have this receipt and a transfer session. So that's the difference between those options that you have. All right, so now we've got about 20 minutes, so let's take a look at the questions that have come in and see if we can get those answered for you. Okay, so we did have a question that came through on the very beginning slide on what I was covering. So what do I mean by a new QuickBooks file and a different file? So what that means is we'll have a customer that'll contact us, hopefully before they do this, and they'll say, we've merged with another company, or we've changed our company name or become incorporated, so our tax ID is changing from maybe a partnership to a corporation. So instead of using maybe our serial number, because it was just a sole proprietorship, now we're using a corporate EIN. So now we have to change the tax ID on our QuickBooks file, and maybe instead of just changing it in QuickBooks, which I don't think you'll be able to do that because it actually changes the structure of things going from a sole proprietorship to a corporation, because it asks you that when you create a new QuickBooks file. You would actually need to create a new QuickBooks file for that new company, and what we get is we'll have somebody call and say, okay, so we've got this new QuickBooks file. Could we just sync our current Activate file that we were linked to that sole proprietorship QuickBooks file to this new QuickBooks file? And so that's where we get into, don't do it. It will break your QuickBooks file because there will be data coming in on the sync that is supposedly already synchronized to QuickBooks, but QuickBooks says it's not there and could potentially delete things from both Activate and QuickBooks. We've seen instances where customers do this and there were a whole bunch of vendor bills that were actually just deleted because QuickBooks, there aren't any vendor bills in there, and you're syncing with this different file and it pretty much just breaks all the links to everything. And that goes for customers, invoices, payments, vendor records can actually be messed up because of this. Sales tax setup. All of that stuff is linked to unique identifiers in the database to the unique identifiers in your original QuickBooks file. So that's why we always say if you're starting a new QuickBooks file, you also are required to start a new Activate file. And I just wanted to make sure that we had this recorded so that way we have something to refer back to later, because that is another question that we got today is, can we get a recording of this session? Yes, we post this recording on our help site. Let me pull that up for you real quick. So that's going to be help.activate.com. And then you can either search webinar in this search box, or you can hover over Learn Activate and webinars drops down. And then what we do is we'll spotlight the current webinar or the previous webinar as a screenshot, which links to the article. Okay, so we've got a customer asking about they have an occasional issue when posting inventory. Is anybody else having this issue? Could you expand on what issue you're having posting inventory? Are you receiving an error or a warning message or something? Okay, so it looks like the message you're receiving is a message that's saying it wants to backdate the inventory entry. I'm assuming this is during the receiving process. So what that means is you have invoiced your products into the negative. And whenever you post that receipt, Activate is going to prompt you to backdate that receipt to cover that negative inventory circumstance. And so you can either, I believe the message is either choose as yes or no or okay or cancel, I think. And if you say no, it will keep it as that date for the receipt. But if you click okay or yes, it will backdate that receipt to cover the negative inventory. So it's not really like an error message. It's just letting you know that as of the date you're posting this receipt, you have negative inventory. Do you want to post it to cover your negative inventory as of whatever that backdate is? So it's more of like a warning or an option to choose. And let's see, we did have one that was in the negative, so I could probably show you that here. We'll use that nifty report filter that I added a moment ago. Less than 0. So this is T1024. I'm not going to go through the whole purchasing process, but obviously we recommend creating a purchase order to receive on, because creating that vendor bill for that purchase order is what reconciles accrued purchase receipts. But I'm going to go straight into inventory receipts. We'll hit new, select the warehouse first. This warehouse will default if you're doing it from a PO. And we're going to receive 5. I don't believe this is lot controlled. So when we hit post, yes. So here's the warning. The following product has a negative quantity on hand prior to the selected transaction date of 6/28. Warehouse F is -3 as of 5/12/2015. Obviously that's really behind, but again, this is demo data, so it's not 100% up to date to this year. And it says, we strongly recommend a transaction date of 5/12/2015 to correct this negative inventory condition. Do you want to change the transaction date to 5/12/15? Obviously, 2 years ago, I'm not going to change the date to affect my prior period, because maybe, you've probably already submitted your tax, your financial statements to everything. So we're going to hit no, and that's going to post it as of 6/28. See, this transaction date stayed at 6/28. If you hit no, it will post it as of, or if you hit yes, it will post it as of 5/12/2015. So again, it's not really an error message. It's more of a warning to make sure you're covering what you had already invoiced. So hit preview. Now we have nothing that's below 0. Okay, it looks like we don't have anybody else asking any other questions. So again, our help site is help.activate.com, activate spelled with 2 C's, and it is a very useful tool. We actually use it. I use it every day. in implementation. I know support uses it every day. It is very handy. The search works kind of like a Google search. So it's going to search not only the title of the articles, but it's also going to search the contents. And we've been working diligently to not only add content, but also add tags to each article. So that way we're trying to think of alternate ways people are searching for this information and make up for that. So make sure that even if you're maybe not searching for specifically what's in that article, it still does come up as an article or as an article that's available on the list. Okay, so I hope you got some good information out of this. Thank you for taking the time today and sitting with us and asking your questions. We did have some really great questions come across. I hope you have a great day and a great holiday next week. Talk to you later.